Okay. Hello. Morning. I don't know why, but like every time I'm about to hit record on one of these, I kind of feel like a little nervous. I don't know. Can't really explain it at the moment. Maybe as I keep doing these, it's something that I'll figure out on my own. But yeah, here we are. 9 a.m. September 14th. Information is everywhere. That will, I hope, make more sense by the time we wrap this up. So there's going to be a common theme, because one thing I've been struggling with is basically the big reason, the big idea, the big premise behind why I wanted to start doing stuff like this to begin with. And the idea behind that is essentially that people have problems, to be blunt, listening basically to anything. And it's something that it's not something that I've just started noticing. It's something that I've quietly noticed for years, but of late, it's something that I've actually noticed how bad it really is. So to kind of paint a picture and like give a perspective, this was something that I'm still struggling with it now, actually. Wanting to do in one video as a whole, or if I should break it down into segments. And this small segment, this video here, is actually what essentially could kind of double as a segment that would have went into the bigger video, into the larger picture. So who knows, maybe that's how I end up doing it. It'll be like a one thing at a time kind of deal, and go from there. But yeah, so now that I got the intro out of the way, and we did figure out the timestamp thing on the last one, so I think that's just what I'll go ahead and do on all of these. Hopefully they don't all end up as long as that last one. That last one had to be as long as it was for obvious reasons, but I digress. So, to give a little backstory on the kind of person I've always been, and this kind of ties into what I said in an old video where I'm still currently figuring out how to take advantage or how to properly use certain aspects that have developed in me over time as I've been growing up. And to put it in a very oversimplified way, it's just become a natural thing for me to pay attention to everybody else whenever I'm in any kind of group dynamic. And it wasn't something that I chose. It wasn't like a trait that I chose and I settled on. It's something that happened naturally, and I take it all the way back to essentially when I was a kid. Because, like I said, it's taken me this long to realize how I could possibly use my natural tendency as, you know, something I could benefit from. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that I was a different kind of kid or whatever, like when I was younger, because I wasn't at all. Like, I was like the typical annoying motherfucker like everybody else, you know, from, I'm thinking like all the way back from like 1st grade through 6th grade. And to set this picture clear, essentially I had, for the most part, the same group of people as friends basically throughout the entire school, from that period of 1st grade to 6th grade, for the most part. And at the end of 6th grade, it was a situation where everybody kind of had to move on. Like, there was no high school or junior high school programs in that building that we were in. So we all had to do the natural thing, which was apply for like other schools that did have those programs. And for the most part, I want to say like 3/4 of that class that I was a part of in 6th grade, like 3/4 of us at the minimum all applied to go to basically the same building. Now, the building itself, it was a 5-story building. Ironically, I could actually still look outside my window right now and still see it. It was a 5-story building, and they had at least 3 different schools within that building. Essentially, one was on the 3rd floor, one was on the 4th floor, one was on the 5th floor. The most, at that time, the highest prestige one was on the 5th floor, and then it actually kind of went in that order. Like the highest prestige one for like the students with the best grades, they got to go into the school in the fifth floor. Then the next highest, the guys with the average grades, like you're thinking like B's to C's, they got into the fourth floor. And then that third floor was like, you know, nobody knew what the hell that third floor was. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I was like a straight A student or anything like that. If I remember correctly, I was more like a B's and C's kind of guy. And, you know, I just did enough to get by. I wasn't like a 65 kind of guy like that. That was a mindset that I kind of found a nice comfort in as I got older. I had a weird phase where basically doing just enough to pass was like acceptable to me, because I stopped caring about like you know, trying to reach for the highest grade possible for various reasons. But yeah, that third floor school was like, nobody had ever heard of it. Like at the time, I'm not even gonna lie, nobody even realized it was there. Because I applied for the other two schools thinking like there was very little chance I'd get into the fifth floor school, and there was probably a really good chance that I would basically be the second wave that got in on the fourth floor. Turns out every single person in my class that applied for those schools, they all got in on the fifth floor and fourth floor. And then there was just me, literally the only guy in the class that did not get into either, and I got into the third floor. And I remember to this day everybody looking at me when the teacher read out loud the school I was going to. Everybody just looked at me like, what the hell is that? And I remember feeling like I died inside because I didn't know what it was either. I was like, I didn't apply for that school. Like, where the hell am I going? And like, why am I not going with everyone else? Why am I not going with my friends? Fast forward a bit. When I got to the first day of school, and the first day of school is like a nerve wrack in and of itself for like the average person, you know, going into a new situation, you don't know anybody, you know, your nerves are like through the roof, etc., etc. It turns out I had one person in there that I did actually know, who I didn't even go to school with them. I actually like played baseball with them. And I grew up with them. So like it was basically like God throwing me a bone or something. Like I at least had one person in there that I knew. So I held on to him like grim death for that first week or so, because I didn't know anybody, and I was terrified. And one thing that I kind of caught really fast, because again, I point back to the kind of kid I was from first through sixth grade. I was kind of loud, I was obnoxious, you know, a typical kid. When I got to seventh grade, I noticed a trend with the girls in particular, where they were kind of no nonsense with people butting in on their conversations. Now, this never happened to me per se, because I was too afraid to go around talking to people in general. So like that actually worked in my benefit. So I wasn't going around just talking to random people and striking up random conversations. I was just quiet out of fear initially. So one thing I noticed was that the girls would be really, really, really hardcore and snap at people. And like the term used to be like, mind your business. And when I heard it, it was like whoever was on the receiving end of that, they just like died inside. They just went completely quiet. It was like the most savage thing like a kid could say to another kid around that time. And it was something that I told myself. I was like, you know what? I am never going to be on the receiving end of something like that. Honestly, stuff like that, I'm still very much like that. If I see something that I deem to be kind of hardcore happen to another person, I make a note of it, and I pay attention to the details, what caused that activity, what caused that event to happen, and I tell myself, I'm not gonna be that guy. Like, I'm never gonna have that happen to me if I can help it, because obviously you don't have full control over what can happen on any given day, any given situation. But there are steps you can take actively every single day, every single minute, to make sure you're not putting yourself in a position for bad things to happen. That's just the universal truth. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it helps your odds. I digress. So I told myself I wasn't going to be that guy that ever had like a girl snap on him like, oh, mind your business, mind your business. No. So as a result, between that and that, you know, that fear that I had coming in, I was always the quiet guy. Instead of going around talking to people and trying to be civil and trying to be the life of the party, I was the guy that was always kind of sitting in the corner, just paying attention to everybody else and watching everybody talk to everybody else, watching how everybody like played with everybody else and all manner of things. It was kind of the start of a foundation that I didn't realize I was going to fully start to develop and appreciate at a time like now, you know, 20 to 30 some odd years later, or whatever the case may be. It's really 20. But yeah, that was kind of where that started. So you spend the longest time going around just kind of paying attention to everybody else, staying quiet, and not really saying anything. Basically, you don't speak unless you're spoken to. I wasn't rude. That's one thing I still maintain. I still kind of tell people now whenever it kind of comes up, is that I'm not the kind of guy that's going to be rude or disrespectful if I'm spoken to first, even by somebody that I don't like. I need a reason to come out and be a savage towards you. Like, I need you to be the one to swing first, basically. That's kind of my approach with everything when it comes to a conflict. I need that dance partner to be the first one to swing. And then in my mind, like, they become fair game, and I could basically return fire any way I see fit, because in my mind, they swung first. So that's kind of how I am with conversation too. It's like, I don't blatantly walk around like, you know, pulling people to the side or trying to get people's attention or anything like that. I just pay attention. I just watch others, and I listen. More importantly, I listen to others when they're speaking. And you know, it's actually, I want to say that it's been one of the biggest reasons that I've had so much success over the years, staying out of trouble, considering like the environment that I grew up in. I could have easily been another, you know, statistic, considering where I grew up, and like I still live where I grew up at the moment. I could have easily been another negative statistic, but I'm not a product of my environment at all, because I had a different approach from everybody else. And that's not all to my credit at all. Like, my mother gets a lot of credit for that, because she was never the type that would let me just hang out just for the sake of hanging out. And that was huge for, you know, me and my older brother with staying out of bullshit. At around that time we grew up, hanging out was like, it was like the thing. It was like the peak experience, just being able to be outside just for the sake of being outside and not being in trouble with your parents. Like, you were just outside just because you could be. And, you know, we grew up with a lot of people kind of grilling us about that. Like, you know, why aren't you able to just come outside and hang out? Like, mom doesn't want us to. Like, it is what it is. And we didn't really appreciate that, you know, in our youth. But I think I can speak for both me and my brother, where we, you know, fully appreciate that shit now. So yeah, I was naturally in a position, I got really lucky with that. I was naturally in a position where I wasn't putting myself in places where I could get in trouble, and I don't put a beacon on myself whenever I'm in a room. Still to this day, I'm like that now, actually. If I'm ever in a room with a bunch of new people, I don't put any kind of spotlight on myself. And I'll actually get into that with, I think, the last segment I'm going to get into on this video. And I have a quiet personality, a quiet demeanor. If I'm spoken to, I will speak back respectfully. But if you don't deliberately seek me out to engage me in a conversation, it'll be like I'm not even there. And that's the way that's by design. That's how I prefer it. So, transition to how this evolved into the second segment of, or third if you're counting the intro, learning how to read people. And this is something that kind of naturally happened too. This wasn't something that I blatantly tried to like add as a personal skill or something like that. I don't even know if I would call it a skill now, to be honest. It's just something that just naturally happens. And not just reading something like tone or cadences or, you know, how somebody's language changes, how they're comfortable speaking language or speaking dialect changes from when they're calm to when they're aggressive. Not just stuff like that, but body language, how body language changes from when someone is calm to when they're aggressive. These are all things that like became a natural like evolution that I started to pay attention to, on top of just listening to other people speak and watching other people interact with other people. And it's one of these things that's kind of out there at all times, which is kind of like the point of the name of the video. Information is everywhere. It's something that you can it's something that you can retain basically at all times, as long as like there's another human being somewhere around you or whatever for you to pay attention to. There's something you can learn about everybody just by paying attention to them, or simply just by listening to them when they speak. And you know, I think maybe now is a good time to kind of get into, like, I might try to dive into this a little deeper, but I think there's a common misconception that people naturally have embedded into them, where they think, you know, listening to other people is kind of seen as like a submissive act to some degree. Or if you're having a debate with somebody, listening to them is almost like the first form of just like agreeing with whatever it is that they say. And that's not fundamentally true. Just because you listen to somebody speak for like X amount of time doesn't mean that they are dominating a conversation or dominating you in a conversation. Doesn't mean anything like that. It also doesn't mean that you're subconsciously agreeing with everything that they're saying. It just means that you're trying to retain the information. And it's not as simple as just letting someone talk either, because a lot of people have natural impulses when it comes to letting other people speak and actually trying to hear them. Because there's a difference between hearing someone speak and actually listening to them. It doesn't count if you let somebody speak for 5 minutes and you didn't retain any of the information that they were trying to give to you. And to go deeper, this is not saying that every single person that speaks to you is giving you information that's worth retaining. That's the whole point of listening to what everybody has to say, is that when you're listening, you can basically deduct to yourself what is useful information versus useless information. You can't do that at a fundamental level if you're just hearing noise whenever somebody speaks. And that's kind of at the root of all of these videos that I'm planning to do under this format. That's kind of the point. That's why there's nothing on the screen. There's no distraction whatsoever. If you wanted to choose to consume this information in a certain kind of manner, you could very well do this where you're just listening to a voice. And it's really up to you to hear what I'm saying or like fully listen to what I'm saying. But this is something that, again, I plan to go into a little bit deeper in maybe another video. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to do that. But getting back on track, tone kind of says tone is an interesting thing. Tone is responsible for a lot of arguments that could be avoidable, and a lot of disconnects between like two individuals having a conversation. More often than not, I want to say that tone influences where a conversation goes more than the actual words being spoken, more often than not. And that also is like a benefactor of people not being people not being like well versed in listening. You're listening to how something is being said rather than listening to what's being said. And it causes a lot of issues, and it causes a lot of friction that isn't necessarily intended at all times by the person speaking with a certain kind of aggressive tone. And you know, this all goes into reading people. It's one of those things where if you can train yourself to kind of look past tone to some degree with certain situations, I'm not going to sit here and say that all people that speak with an aggressive demeanor are friendly or they're actually not intending to be aggressive. Or there's choice people who just naturally have an aggressive tone about them when they speak. If it's always there, if it's consistently there, those might be the cases where you might want to train yourself to look past the tone to see what's actually being said. But in the case where it's the opposite, where somebody's not typically aggressive with when they speak, when they do choose to be aggressive, that is very much intended. That is something that you do look at face value, and you know, you're basically on high alert to see what's going on. How do I calm this person down? Like, what is their issue? How am I contributing to this issue? Etc., etc. And this is all just speaking, by the way. It becomes even easier when you factor in body language. And essentially, what you're paying attention to is how the body language changes from when somebody is calm or in a friendly state versus when they're in an aggressive one. If somebody that's typically, to use the same analogy, if somebody is typically like not moving around much when they're speaking in a calm state, I mean, if they can sit still for the most part, if they can maintain like eye contact, if they don't appear to be visibly distracted, all of these things are tells while they're in a calm state. But then you notice a shift when they're aggressive, or all of a sudden their arms are moving around a lot more, their posture changes to like a more you know, quote unquote positive one, or excuse me, an aggressive one. This is basically telling you everything you need to know before you even get into the part of listening to what they're saying. This is all free, very, very free information that a human being is not capable of like naturally hiding. You have to train yourself to hide these tells. You don't just naturally learn how to hide that stuff. And these are things that you can take full advantage of if you think to actually pay attention to it. You could basically have a one-up on anybody you have a conversation with if you just pay attention to what they're saying. Like, to some degree, everybody that chooses to speak to you is basically telling you what you need to know about them. And again, circling back earlier, it's fully up to you to decide what part of what they're saying is useful and what part of what they're saying is not. But the fact remains that information is there. It's readily there for you to like accept and, you know, use for whatever means you need to use them for. And the same way goes the other way around. Anytime you speak to somebody, you are basically putting yourself out there to be read. Kind of like when to keep it, you know, with some of the guys that I know that may or may not be listening to this, to keep it in comparison with gaming and whatnot. That's essentially what live streaming is. Live streaming is a gamer putting themselves out there to be observed. Good things and bad. You're putting yourself out there to be learned and to be read at someone else's discretion. That isn't putting themselves in a position where they can be observed and they can be read. That's what live streaming is, to a certain degree. So understand that everything that I'm saying right here in this segment, this is not something that like you could just go around and, you know, all of a sudden like think like, oh, I'm gonna take advantage of it. No, this goes both ways. Every time you choose to speak, if someone has that same mindset where they're actually listening and paying attention to you, they're picking up on basically details that they need to learn about who you are as a person and how you carry yourself. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people just don't think about at all whenever they go about their day just talking to people. And that's why I like to bring it back to my buddies. That's why I have my times every now and then where I just kind of like, I kind of call something out before it's even acknowledged in the room. This guy's a little triggered. This guy is not too happy about this. This guy is bored. This guy is sleepy. Those are all details that I'm just sitting there picking up just by listening to you. And it's just something that it naturally happens. It's not something that's meant to be like aggressive at all, or uses leverage against anybody. That's not the intent. It's just naturally how I am whenever I'm in an environment with other people. So pushing forward into the next section here, which is my personal loophole. This is where I put myself out there and like my potential flaw as it could be seen. Maybe even to some degree, I see it as a flaw. And this is why I don't have more relationships and more friendships than maybe you could argue I should have, for a guy that does choose to go around listening to everybody else and is quiet and doesn't go out of his way to try to steal attention. My loophole is essentially that I need a middle ground with people for the most part. Now, what do I mean by middle ground? Middle ground, I want to further elaborate in this one scenario that I'm talking about here. A middle ground is basically a common activity, or yeah. I would call that's exactly the way I want it. A common activity. An activity that you don't share in common with somebody else. You guys aren't going to be around each other. Like if somebody likes playing basketball, if you don't like playing basketball, obviously you're not going to walk around to a basketball court to like pursue a friendship with a guy who does like playing basketball. It's not naturally going to happen. There has to be other factors that come in for you that force you to walk onto that court to pursue that friendship. That's what I mean by common activity. If it's an activity where you find that you have interest in it and somebody else that you don't know has interest in it, that's a common activity. So my thing is that I need that activity in place as basically the icebreaker. Again, I'm not the kind of guy that feels the need to go around talking to people. And this is something that really shines whenever I'm like in a workspace, like and I have a job or whatever. I tend to get on okay with people for the most part, because I keep my attention on my job. Whatever it is they ask me to do, I focus on doing that to the best of my ability. And for the most part, when people speak to me, I listen. And if I listen long enough where they present me with opportunities to speak back, I have that activity in place where even if they are attempting to listen to me, that activity is stealing some of their attention away, where they're not just solely focusing on me. And that's basically the means where I get on with people. If there's ever a situation that presents itself where there is no common activity, the whole thing falls apart. Because I'm not an open book. I'm not the kind of guy that just goes around and like wants to tell his life story to like random people. No. I will always default to just listening to what you have to say, and eventually you'll run out of things to say. I may or may not feel comfortable to talk back to you, and if I don't, that whole dynamic falls apart. I need the activity there in place to make sure there is no room for that dynamic to fall apart. So I mentioned like the workspace, that being a thing. There's a bunch of people that while I was on the job, I got along with just fine. I learned quite a bit about a lot of these people. Some of them, in some small cases, learned a little bit about me. Not enough where they can say that they like really know me or know what kind of person I am. But, know enough that they know that I'm okay to be around, so to speak. This is actually why I've historically gotten along with females very well in the workspace. It's because more often than not, I'm a rare case where they can be around a man who isn't actively looking to pursue them as a partner, as a life partner, or like a one-night stand or something like that. I am literally just listening to them just for the sake of listening. And that's it. I don't have any hidden agenda of putting a spotlight on myself. That's the opposite of what I want. So as a result, a lot of women that I've worked around naturally feel comfortable working around me. There's nothing to worry about. There's no pursuit there at any time. And I like to believe that most women have that radar about them where they can pick up on somebody who's interested versus somebody who's not. They don't just drop the guard willy-nilly and, you know, boom, you're in. Like, this is not something you could like use as a loophole around the barrier. No. The minute you appear to have interest, the walls come up, especially if they're not interested in you. So because there was not that extra layer of pursuit, I've never had any issues in the workspace working around, you know, around women. So, you know, obviously that goes hand in hand with working around men too. I'm not looking to put any kind of spotlight on myself. If anything, I want the spotlight on the job way before I want that spotlight on me. And that's how I get by. And it's the same thing with gaming. It's the same exact thing. If I have a situation where I'm like into a video game and you happen to be interested in that same video game, we can get along just fine for the most part. I'm not going to say that we could become like, you know, a dynamic or a duo or anything like that, because obviously I'm very selective with who I choose to keep around and, you know, keep pursuing the gaming dynamic with, and who I don't. And you know, it's one of those things, if you remove, you see it as a streamer all the time, like this is kind of the fundamental problem. I mentioned this in the old video too. This is what's at play as well. Again, when a streamer chooses to go the variety route, the common ground is the game that you have interest in, that you're choosing to stream, where the viewer also has interest in the game. The minute you go variety and you switch up the game, the whole process starts over and you lose that viewer in most cases. Once you remove the common activity, the whole thing falls apart. And that's basically my loophole around my personal system, is that I try to only get involved in these situations where the common activity is there. It's there clear as day. And, you know, you hope to God that that common activity has a strong foundation where it has like lasting power. And it's something that, you know, you can just chill for a bit and, you know, relax. And it's something that'll be around for a while. So like with gaming again, like that's why it's so important to like find something that, you know, you'll be on. That's why it's important to have a main game for me, basically. It's something that I have a place of comfort that I know I'm not going to like jump from thing to thing to thing. It's going to have my attention. I'm always going to be there. And, you know, as far as streaming goes, I had that for like 3 years. I comfortably had that for 3 years, and those were probably my strongest 3 years as a streamer. And then, you know, overnight I didn't. And it's been kind of this ever since. It's been like what it is now, where it's like I pop up sometimes, I don't pop up others. And, you know, I still talk to certain people, I no longer talk to others. That's just kind of how it works. So yeah, I'm going to call an audible here because I had one more thing I wanted to get into, but I don't see there's no correlation between everything I said. I feel like everything that I've covered so far has had some kind of correlation where one has kind of led to the next. And this one kind of seems like it would be a jump. It would be a major stretch. So the thing that I was going to get into last, I'll try to fit it in a different video. And we'll leave this one here. If you made it this far, I genuinely appreciate it. And again, another reason, I'm not going to lie, I don't want every video to be as long as that last one. Just being straight up honest, I don't want that. I don't want every video to be like that last one. So if you made it this far, I genuinely appreciate it. Like I've said before, I'm really bad at outros, so I'm just going to leave it here. If you choose to comment, be respectful, and yeah, have a good one. Peace.